Cyprian Ivanov. What is the reasoning for the Sea Org habit of viewing swearing as trustworthy? Is it that they pick the idea of tact as being phony and strive to do the opposite? Is it that holding back from swearing indicates self-control, and the lack of controlling one's emotions in the very short term is considered a sign of sincerity? Is it just that Hubbard used swearing and threats for emphasis and people picked up the habit from him? That's an interesting question, Cyprian, and actually a little bit of a mix of your guesses there, or suppositions as to what's going on with all the swearing. The issue that is probably referred back to and is certainly read more often than anything else in Scientology is keeping Scientology working. And I've done video breakdowns of this. We've talked about this a lot. It's a very important issue in the Church of Scientology, and it's part of it's heavy level of indoctrination, and it's repeated over and over at the beginning of every course. It's talked about, referred to, KSW. This is something Tom Cruise even talked about in his video, his turtleneck video. In Keeping Scientology Working, L. Ron Hubbard stresses that the social veneer makes this universe seem quite mild, but it's not a mild universe, and only the tigers survive. Now, that's not a direct quote, it's a paraphrase of what Hubbard said, but the social veneer that he refers to is manners, etiquette, swearing or not swearing, right? Using your words. These kinds of things, these social niceties, right? This sort of lubrication of human relations that we've developed over the years. Scientologists, as you progress up the levels of Scientology, as you get more and more indoctrinated in it, and as you go from public to staff to Sea Org, where time starts becoming very compressed, the urgency with which you are dealing with how much time you have every day is going up, 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 because you're being hit harder and harder and harder with more and more demands and more fear-mongering, more and more anxiety-inducing kinds of things about how the world's fallen apart, right? That kind of thing, like we talked about in the last question. Because of the urgency, stress levels are higher. Anxiety is higher as you're rising up this ladder. Now, I'm talking about the staff, or the public staff Sea Org ladder, right? Going up the bridge doesn't necessarily do this, right? There are very well-mannered, cultured, very etiquette-aware OT8s, right? Who speak well, talk well, very mannered people, but they're not Sea Org, and most of the time they're not staff, right? When you get into staff and you get into the Sea Org, that's where all this, all the swearing and stuff comes from. Public level Scientologists sometimes don't have any time for that. They're like, hey man, shut off the potty mouth. I'm not interested in being talked to that way. And if you're talking to a public person, and especially if you're trying to get in their good side and you want their money, then you will comply with their wishes. But if you're in an ethics handling where the staff member or the Sea Org member is the one who has the authority in the room, they don't care what the public person has to say about their swearing. Getting back to the stress and the anxiety levels that come up on staff and in the Sea Org, that's where the swearing comes out, because the tempers are shorter, time is more limited, patience is strained, and so let's fucking go, man. Come on, let's move your ass. Let's go, right? Like that kind of language just flows from Sea Org members' mouths because they're just talking that way. It's just it is a reflection of the impatience and frankly the stress that they're under. So I think that's how I would approach answering that question. You also mentioned as one of the things, L. Ron Hubbard doing this. Yeah, Hubbard swore like a sailor when he wanted to, and apparently that was quite a bit. And he could be a ruthless taskmaster. So he wasn't afraid of giving somebody the sharp end of his tongue if he thought that they deserved it. And that sort of stuff rolls downhill. Of course it does. And certainly Miscavige learned those kind of that kind of culture. That Miscavige was steeped in that as a CMO messenger and as a person coming up during that time when Hubbard was still around. So that's where so the swearing still comes from the top down. So that is a factor as well. If it was discouraged, or if Miscavige, came down with some rule someday that, hey, no more, that's it. Sea Org members, I don't care what circumstances, and then knock it off, then they would stop, or at least they would try to curb their enthusiasm, but for swearing. But that's it is from the top for sure. So there's that factor as well. And there you go.